came from a big city where crime was around you and you were aware of your security. We very strongly felt we had moved to a very safe kind of community.
I've always said I thought the Ramseys were the nicest people I ever knew. And I say this 15 months after it happened, that I'm more and more convinced that they are the nicest people I've ever known.
Okay, so we are doing the Steins. Might take a couple of videos, might take several to look at the Steins, understand a little bit about who they are. So this is kind of going to be sort of an introductory video just to kind of get to know them. Maybe you're familiar with them, maybe you're not. I'm kind of familiar with them. So we'll start off with this.
From a big city where crime was around you and you were aware of your security. We moved to Boulder. We very strongly felt we had moved to a very safe, small kind of community.
I've always said I thought the Ramseys were the nicest people I ever knew. And I say this 15 months after it happened, that I'm more and more convinced that they are the nicest people I've ever known.
From what I researched, I will say this. It's kind of like a birds of a feather flock together thing. I'm not saying the Ramseys aren't nice people. I don't contend that at all, but I do kind of contend that maybe they've done some shady things. So let's get started. So in this analysis, I have several key points that I want to go over. And the first thing is to sort of, like I said, introduce the Steins. Just kind of talking a little bit about him, and then kind of looking at the overview of Doug Stine in terms of his friendship with Burke, just like an overview. Mentioning a little bit about the December 23rd party, which was a couple days prior to this whole JonBenet incident, you know, when Susan Stine or Fleet called. Apparently the story was that Fleet was down on his knee and trying to call for his mother, who was somewhere else, and trying to get her some medicine. And then he was trying to dial out to all these different places and made the wrong call. And, you know, somebody came to the door or the cops came to the door and said, hey, what's going on? And Susan just wouldn't open the door for him. And you know what's really weird to me? You know, if the cops came to the door, Susan she's done that twice. You know, the cops come to the door and she just refuses to open the door. And that's really something about that strikes me as odd, that when the cops come to the door, you are scared to open the door. Like, why? What are you doing to where you're afraid and you won't even let the cops in? You won't even let the cops come in to be like, hey, what's going on? Just checking things. Like, can you open the door and step outside and just kind of show full body and like, hey, I'm Susan. I think a friend, dialed you guys. And so that's really weird. But anyways, talking a little bit about that 911 call, a little bit more, and kind of getting her response. And then John and Patsy stop at the Stein's house that night, some of the implications for the timeline, and then trying to emphasize a little bit more about some of the early signs of the closeness. You know, Steins, all of a sudden, they weren't close, and then they got close. Susan's gatekeeping of who entered the house, including blocking the police at the December 23rd party. And actually, we will see that Susan, over time, Susan was quite good at this. So let's kind of start from the top. Looking at Glen Stine and whatnot. So Glen Stine, it's like when I was researching this and looking at some of these articles prior to this, Glen Stine his name was in the headlines in abundance, but then after the murder of JonBenet, it just seemed like Glen was gone off the face of the earth. He didn't talk to any newspapers. Glen didn't say anything. You'd be hard pressed, I think, from what I've researched, to find Glen Stine's information anywhere. Glen Stine talking about anything. I mean, this man, all of a sudden, it's not like he was a stranger to the media. When I tell you, I have over 25 something odd articles. Glen Stine is there, and he's talking and this and that about his job and things of that nature. But like when it came to JonBenet, like he just fell off the map, didn't have anything to say. So held a number of high-ranking administrative roles at the University of Colorado. I saw that in some of the forums, so it's good to be able to confirm that. He was the chief financial officer, VP of finance, and VP of central administration. I think he was also VP of budgeting or something like that at Boulder, Colorado, University of Boulder, Colorado. In these roles, he oversaw the budgets of all 4 CU campuses. He held impressive academic pedigree. He had a PhD from Harvard, pretty impressive. I had a BS from Michigan State, Bachelor's of Science from Michigan State, and then went and got an MPA from UNC Chapel Hill. Before his time at CU, he was affiliated with the Ohio Board of Regents, further establishing his career in education and the public sector. So I had a little time. What I'm not clear about is whether they lived in Ohio prior. I'd have to check some of the records just to kind of see. But yeah, I had some connection to them and got the PhD from Harvard. What I noted here that was interesting was he went to Michigan State, and I think also, I feel like Susan Stine went to Michigan State. Let me check. Okay, just a little check, just double checking. So, Susan Bozak Stine, Susan B. Stine, and then Glen R. Stine. I'm sorry, Susan Bozak was her name prior. And so when she got married to Glen, she became Susan Bozak Stine. And then Glen is Glen Raymond. So Mr. and Miss Frank H. Bozak of Northville announced the engagement, and this is coming from the Detroit Free Press in Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, Wednesday, May 5th of 1971. They announced the Northville, Bozak of Northville announced the engagement of their daughter, Susan M. So Susan M. Bozak to Glen Stine, son of Mr. and Miss Leo C. Stine of Kalamazoo. Miss Bozak will graduate from Michigan State. That's what I thought. Okay, cool. In June, her fiance is a graduate of MS of Michigan. Okay. And is presently attending University of North Carolina for his master's degree. On August 28th. The wedding will be planned. So I think he went to Michigan, and she went to Michigan State. So her and John have that in common. And, if you read through some of the books through The Death of Innocence, you kind of see those two kind of hanging out together a little bit, probably on that MSU pride kind of deal. And so they both went for their undergrad. So getting back to things. So then Glen transitions to, but this is much later. And I'll put like I'll drop like something in the timeline here. So Glen, prior to Coludus, I think was in 2014, or something like that. But prior to Coludus, I think around 1998, Glen was starting to work with John, according to The Death of Innocence. Glen was starting to work with John at JLEO North America, which is some sort of broadcasting equipment technology firm kind of deal, I guess. And so they were supposed to be going on that venture together. But as John tells the story, he had a VP of sales, and the VP of sales essentially came to him because John was the president of the company. And it's really weird because the VP of sales came to John and said, hey, you don't have a good reputation, in the world. You don't have a good reputation in the world. So, some of the partners are coming to us, some of the people are coming to us, some of our clients, what have you, are coming to us and saying, isn't that the guy who killed his daughter? Or isn't that the guy who, his daughter's dead or something like that? And so essentially John was bad for business. So that nixed John's involvement in JLEO North America. Why that nixed Glen Stine's involvement in the company, I don't know. But apparently they're ride or die together. You from Michigan, I'm from Michigan kind of deal. You know, we both kind of went to the same kind of college, you know, rivals, you know, but, you know, Michigan nonetheless. We get it. We understand that. And I guess Glen Stine would ride or die for, you know, John Ramsey, so much so that obviously we move with you, but I'm going to lose my job with you too. And that is a little weird, that kind of dedication, because it's like, who if nobody's working, who's making the money? Like what kind of setup are we dealing with? I guess is my question, to where, first of all, you can just quit your job and just be like, you know what? I'm moving with my friends. I'm going to uproot everything. What is it exactly that John was doing for you, that John and Patsy, that they were doing for you guys, to where you would want to uproot your family to go with them? What is that? I wonder if they thought that John and Patsy were going to get back on their feet, maybe, and then it was going to be lucrative for them later on. Or, and I don't see why that would be a motivation, because Glen didn't need John. Glen had his hands in the money pot at CU Boulder. The man was making about 128 grand in 1993, something like that. 92, 93, 94, something like that. He was making like 128 grand without the bonus, if I'm correct. I may be misremembering, but his salary and like several other people was set at like 128.5. And they kind of came under fire for that. You know, people started asking, why are y'all making this much money? Or, you know, some of their superiors started asking, like, why are y'all making this much money? Especially, and I think it really happened when there was an economic downturn, is when those questions started coming. Like, can the university support these high salaries in times of economic downturn? So that's where prior to Colludus, he went to JLEO North America. Now, later on, when things didn't work out with JLEO North America, he went out on his own and he started trying to do a little bit of consulting on the side, which is where Colludus Consulting came in. And Colludus Consulting was a firm specializing in administrative solutions for higher education institutions. And so that's right up Glen's alley. You know, if I don't know anything else, I know money, and I know education. So that's perfect for me. And it's also interesting that, and let me go over this. During his tenure, however, his career at CU wasn't without controversy. During his tenure, a scandal emerged involving CU treasurer Stephen Stroop and potential conflicts of interest related to university investments. Stroop claimed that his actions had been approved by Glen and other supervisors. Yet, while Stroop was dismissed, Glen did not face disciplinary action. At the time, Glen also defended the high compensation packages of CU executives by comparing them to private sector norms. Notably, media attention turned toward Glen around September of '97, coinciding with the period when he and his wife were hosting the Ramseys in their Atlanta home. And I think what they mean by that is, I think Peter Boyles, according to The Death of Innocence, Peter Boyles had called out the university for keeping Glen on, essentially saying this dude is harboring a fugitive and like he should not be working here anymore. And so there's came under a little bit of fire, essentially is what happened. But the finagling and the of the money and the questionable decisions with the money, comparing a public university, if I'm understanding CU Boulder or University of Boulder, or University of Colorado, if I'm understanding it correctly, they're public. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's fine. But traditionally, private institutions, if I'm understanding correctly, have higher tuition than public institutions. Public institutions get a little bit more funding from the state. If I'm thinking about it correctly, they get a little bit more funding from the state because they're public institutions and they're trying to serve a certain demographic. And so to do some of the things that they need to do, they need state money. So they go out for those things. Whereas private institutions kind of cater to a different audience sometimes. So some of the state money is a little bit more difficult to come by and whatnot. So Glen comes under fire for some money stuff. Now, I just want to put a pin here because I think it's interesting that John and Glen work together, and both John and Glen were criticized in some way, shape, or form for how they handled a financial situation. Both at the top of their game in terms of handling money. John was a president, CEO, and he had been accused by Jeff Merrick, I think it was, of, kind of messing with the sales data, finagling the sales data a little bit. All of a sudden, we go from $16 million to like 160 within like the course of a year. How is that? What lever did you pull? And it's possible that Jeff was like, yo, I think there might be some conflation of the information, some conflation of the numbers. And I got to call that out. And so all of a sudden, Jeff Merrick becomes a target 3 or 4 times. Glen Stine also comes under fire for the way he handles money in an economic downturn. Are you paying these people too much? And now I got to justify when I'm paying these people by private institution standards. It's like, but you're not a private institution though. Can you make it a little bit more apples to apples in your comparison? Tell me what other public universities in your area are doing. What's the norms around people in your area? And that's where it kind of gets funny in finances, right? When you're dealing with money, it happens all the time. People make excuses for why they are increasing their own salary, and that it's kind of tempting to be over money. And that's why you hear about fraud and embezzlement a lot, because it's very hard to be over money, apparently, and not try to finagle some stuff. You know what I mean? It's very difficult. And so Glen was able to raise his salary a little bit and he had an answer, and some things that he did were called into question. This Stroop guy said he had a conflict of interest with some sort of investment group. And I think more specifically, this Stroop guy was, the universities have investments. They invest in certain things to obviously grow their portfolio to kind of be able to pay scholarships and stuff like that. You don't want your endowment just sitting. You want to be able to let it grow, and so we can have more money to pay out scholarships and grants and build around the campus and fix things and stuff like that. We don't want to just solely depend on tuition and donors and stuff like that. We want to be able to make our money work for us, is essentially what happened. So I think what the deal was is that one of the investments that Stroop was involved in was a group that he knew, and he was specifically choosing them and saying, we're going to give all of our investment business to you, is I think what happened. So moving on. Next, we have a little bit about Susan Stine. Now, Susan Stine's information was very sparse. I thought that I was going to find a lot about Susan Stine in the news, given that Susan was like Patsy's pit bull, but I didn't really find a lot of information on Susan that was just absolutely crazy. But Susan Stine, obviously Glen's wife, worked at University of Colorado for a little bit as well as the director of planning and research until her position ended in October of '96. though at the time not deeply connected to the Ramseys. Before JonBenét's death, she quickly emerged as the key figure in the inner circle. She was the one who recommended FBI. She definitely did. FBI profiler John Douglas to the Ramseys, which is a move that shaped much of their narrative strategy in months that followed. Beyond that, Susan became a logistical and emotional anchor. She monitored online chatter about the case. She helped the Ramseys manage media exposure and even scouted new schools for Burke when the family later relocated to Atlanta. Susan took it upon herself to be so instrumental in the Ramseys' lives. And Susan would put, Patsy recounts a story when they were in Charlevoix, in Death of Innocence. She recounts a story when they were in Charlevoix. And there was this reporter that came up, and, Patsy didn't know. Now, I will say this. If we go by how, the Ramseys were describing some of these reporters were, these reporters were absolute menace. And I mean that. They were absolute menace. Some of these reporters would walk up with flowers and be like, oh my God. Oh my God, these flowers are from Princess Diana. They would be like, oh my God, these flowers are from Princess Diana. And I think Nidra was there at the time, and Nidra was on the phone, and she said, oh my God, hey, I gotta call you back. A representative from Princess Diana just came through the door. And so she hung up the phone. And Patsy was so gullible, because Patsy was like, oh, you never know who to trust. Is it somebody with a real story or, and so Patsy was like frantic. Oh, I got to call for help a lot of times. But this time she let the person right on in. Anybody with flowers could show up, with a bouquet of flowers could show up. And so essentially this person comes in and like, oh my God, I'm from Princess Diana. She's seen your story. She follows it. And she's just so heartbroken, and her heart goes out. And Patsy wants, I want that. I want that. So Patsy invites him in. It turns out it was a reporter. And so that's wild. And so Patsy recounts this story where Susan, there was this person who came up in Charlevoix, and a lady who, had painting interests along with Patsy. And she comes up, introduces herself to Patsy, and Susan is apparently like, I don't like her. I don't trust her. I don't have a good feeling about her. She needs to stay away. And Patsy apparently was like, oh, Susan, you're doing too much. Stay out of the way, blah, blah, blah. And Susan was basically in a position in Patsy's life to where she could overrule Patsy. And I was like, dang, that's kind of, because when you become friends, it all depends on how you work yourself into people's lives. You ever had that one friend to where like the friendship just sort of grows organically, right? You meet, you guys are both in Starbucks or something like that, or Barnes and Nobles, and you guys are looking at books or picking up a caramel frappe mocha chocolate or what, I don't know what they do, but you're picking up your coffee, and somebody drops their purse, and the other person picks it up, and you guys start talking about, oh, well, where are you from, or what do you do? And you guys just kind of strike up, and you guys sit down at the local, or not the local, but the nearby table, and you start talking to each other, and you find out that you have a lot in common, and so on and so forth. Oh, my son goes to this school. Oh, so does mine. My daughter's as well, blah, blah, blah. And so, maybe we should hang out some more. And that friendship kind of grows organically. How that person positions themselves in your life, or how emotionally open or available you are to that individual depends, or sort of dictates how they can speak into your life, or what they can do to you, or how they can shut you down. And you just kind of say, okay, Susan said it. That's it. I'm just going to, because otherwise it'd be like, what are you talking to? you know, if somebody's like, no, no means no, Patsy. And then Susan would be like, or Patsy would be like, I'm a grown woman. You're not going to tell me what to do. But in this case, Patsy is telling me that I allowed Susan a place in my life. So Patsy was so emotionally, she desired to be so emotionally attached to someone that she wanted a friendship where she allowed somebody to be dominant over her, and not dominant in the way of being disrespectful, and making me do something like maybe like John would have been, or John saying, you're my wife, this is what it's going to be. Not in that way, but she's looking more for a companionship. And she finds that in Susan Stine is like a caretaker of Patsy. I take care of you. I try to make you laugh. I try to soothe you and address your needs and your doubts. And I try to make you, I try to cheer you up when you need it. This is kind of like the relationship, I think, that is happening with Susan, or is developing with Susan and Patsy. And so Patsy wants to fall into Susan's arms. She wants to be protected by Susan. And Susan is happy to be motherly in that way to Patsy, to kind of hold her and rock her and stuff like that is kind of the vibe that I'm kind of getting. And now Susan knows, whether it's probably not discussed, but now Susan knows that she can trump things that Patsy says. Now Susan knows how to stay out of the way when she needs to stay out of the way, but Susan takes a lot of liberty in Patsy and John's life without asking. And John and Patsy are more than happy to allow her to do that. And to finish the story, this person comes up. Susan says, I don't like her. And the point that I was making with that roundabout was Patsy was like, Susan, you're tripping, let her come through. And then they got back to the Charlevoix house and Susan was like, no, I'm not going to be disrespectful, but firmly, no, you can't come here. You can't come on this property. Get away. And Patsy let it happen. But after Susan left to go back to Boulder for some reason, this individual shows back up and sort of starts the friendship back up with Patsy and says, hey, we should go out. We should paint a little bit, so on and so forth, blah, 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 blah. Somewhere along the line, this individual, Patsy gets wind that this individual is the wife of a tabloid editor. And this individual apparently was trying to extract information from Patsy. And Patsy's point was was Susan, and she said this, she was like, Susan was right all along. Which tells me that now Patsy is giving even more credence to the words of Susan. And so this is how the relationship is tightening up and developing more. Which is why Susan was able to do everything that she did. According to one source, Fleet White, an early and outspoken advocate for transparency in the case, confronted Glen Stine in an effort to reach the Ramseys, who by then were shielded within the Stine household. Susan, for her part, not only coordinated the family's day-to-day schedule, but also acted as a gatekeeper, filtering access to John and Patsy while overseeing Burke's daily life. And there were reporters trying to come to the house, and Susan would step, man, Susan, bruh. When I tell you tricky, Susan was tricky. Susan did this thing, Patsy recounts in the death of Innocence. Susan did this thing to where there was a reporter snooping around outside the house on Sunday on a Sunday morning. And Susan stepped outside and she said, "Hey, who are you?" Or she kind of, cracked the door and said, "Who are you?" Guy said, "Man, I'm blah, 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 blah. I'm a detective." And she said, "Let me see some credentials." So he gave his credentials and she took his credentials inside and closed the door. And she went inside and she was on the phone with the cops. And she was like, "Yeah, there's this guy outside and I got his information." And she was just kind of going off and talking about it. And essentially she just started toying with the guy because she found out that he was a news reporter and stuff like that. Another wild way for reporters to approach you. But she found out that he was a reporter, essentially, and just kind of started toying with him and kind of withholding his stuff instead of, and I guess, I'm not saying she had to do one thing one way or the other, to just throw his wallet back out there and be like, "Get away from my house. You're trash. You're not who you say you are." I mean, I guess you could toy with him if you want to, but the sneakiness of saying, you never meant to let this dude in the house. What you planned was to take his credentials and shut the door the entire time. Instead of saying something like, "Go away, get away from me," Susan liked to toy. She loved to toy with the media. And we saw it with the Chris Brennan thing. Charles Brennan, I think, who was a writer for, I think, it's not the Denver Post. Maybe it's the Denver Post. But anyways, I know it's not the Denver Post. I feel like it's not. But anyways, it's something that went out of business. It's a newspaper that went out of business. And when she was toying with him in the news and stuff like that. So she likes to toy with these news people, these paparazzi. She likes to teach them a lesson. That really gets her off, toying with these people. Patsy tells a story to where I think they were in Atlanta and they tried to drive up to their, I think it was John's dad's garage or something like that, or maybe Patsy's dad. But he had the garage open. He said, "No, there's no news people over here." And they drove into the garage. At this time, they were trying to switch cars a lot. And, Susan was advising them off of that. And they were trying to switch cars a lot to stay away from the paparazzi and trick them. And Susan was all too happy for that. When they switched cars, the paparazzi was waiting for him. He's like, "Yeah, y'all thought y'all tricked me?" And they came out and Susan sped off. The dude was following them, telling them. And John and Patsy were trying to duck, not be seen. So they pull up to the light. And when the light turns, Susan knew she was in a position to U-turn real quick and into oncoming traffic and burn off without the other person being able to catch them. And so the person was just kind of stuck off at the light, and then they dipped around some side roads and stuff like that. So Susan was all too happy, and Susan had a little bit of a interesting streak. The picture that you guys will probably see. Let me see if I can't find it. It's a little grainy, but this is a picture that they were talking about in talking about when they were in Charlevoix. And apparently Glen is pretty tall, somewhat tall, and he has long arms. Patsy recounts, Glen putting his arms around her and kind of comforting her and stuff like that when he would see that she was trailing off. But this, the Ramseys and the Steins really are birds of a feather because they do mischievous stuff together. Like when this picture was taken, the, I guess, report was kind of saying, and they were mentioning that the report was saying that they were out, on a boat drinking wine. As you can see, this wine glass in Glen's hand. It's a little grainy, but you can see this wine glass in Glen's hand. Oh, they're out on a boat, because they got away with it and blah, 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 blah. And they got away from the police is what Patsy and John were responding to. And they were a little annoyed by that. So their retort was, Well, if you saw us with the glass of wine, you missed the money shot, because the money shot was about 20 minutes prior to that, when we started to see like the little paparazzi start to sneak their little heads out. You know, what if they were like, what if the paparazzi were to sneak their heads from behind the bushes and stuff like that? 20 minutes prior, Patsy goes on to explain that 20 minutes prior, the money shot would have been when John and Susan were talking about using an automatic, let me see how I can make this YouTube friendly, an automatic weapon. And they were talking about using that to basically catch paparazzi people coming through the bushes, and they would use that on them to just kind of spray, in a sense, across, is essentially what they were saying. And they were laughing about that. You know, I'm not here to rain on anybody's parade on how they joke. You know, was that a little crude to think of the paparazzi like that, to go to that extent? Maybe. But I guess from their perspective, they're saying, oh, the paparazzi just continues to come, which the paparazzi, they were on the Ramseys like white on rice. I mean, these people couldn't go anywhere without being, if you get spotted, they're chasing you down. I've always thought the paparazzi was a little weird for that. I'm not going to lie. A little weird for that. Like, I understand taking a picture and taking a video and talking to people, but the links that you will go to, because sometimes the paparazzi, they'll jump in front of you and try to be nice, but it's like, yo, you have been literally stalking me all day long. That is weird. I don't care if your job is to take pictures. That there's got to be a better way, because you stalking me all day is really weird to me. I'm not gonna lie. And so I guess John and them, where they were joking, is like, man, you can't get rid of these guys, so you got to take this automatic thing and boop, 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 boop. You know, it's what they were laughing at. And somehow, some way, Susan was like, you know what? I really want one. Not that one specifically, but I want another type, one that creates bigger holes in a person with one go, if I can say it like that. Trying to be YouTube friendly. Apparently, John happened to have one of those on the boat. And I'm like, how did you have the shot with you on the boat for you to give her to be playing around with? And that's what Patsy was talking about. 20 minutes prior, they were like, yo, John was like, oh, I got a piece on me right now. You know, I got a piece on me right now. Here, Susan, you want it? You can have it here. Anything for a friend. Because it's like one thing for y'all to be talking about it and just be giggling about it. It's also quite another thing for like you to go pop the trunk and be like, yo, no, I really got it in the trunk. You know what I mean? I really got it on me. So whatever you want to do, we can do it. That's just a little weird to me. I'm not going to lie. Why do you have a shot weapon on you on the boat? Are you expecting pirates? Are you expecting Captain Hook to come up on you? Because why would you? I could understand a 9 milli. I could understand like a hand weapon, something that you could pull from the boot. But why do you got that kind of that? See, that's what I'm talking about. when we talk about the Ramseys in terms of, and I'm going to move on, we talk about the Ramseys in terms of them getting a crazy firepower lawyer team squad. That's not the only way that they would go big. You sitting on a boat, and instead of, because you could have had a three-man lawyer team that was local, you know, some simple, if I'm just trying to make sure that my rights aren't violated. That's it. I know I didn't do this. I'm just going to make sure my rights aren't violated. Y'all went full on because you acted like you knew you were in trouble from day one. Because from day one, your lawyers came with investigators. It didn't evolve into investigators and PR. From day one, the Ramseys had investigators. From day one, what will y'all be investigating? What will y'all be looking at? With the investigation hasn't even developed. What were y'all gonna look at? I'm confused. What would you know to look at? You guys are not cops. You guys don't, somehow, some way, the Ramseys got it in their mind that a team of 3 people would be a lot better, who have not solved a murder case, would be a lot better than a team of individuals who have solved 15. Tell me where that makes sense. You, who know nothing about how to investigate murders and homicides, get 1 or 2 people versus, with no tools, just a podunk, reeky dink setup. Somebody going around town very creepily, sneaking behind someone, very creepily sneaking behind bushes, watching you. And then you look over and you be like, I can see you. What are you doing? Oh, I'm Ollie Gray. I'm a private investigator for the Ramseys. What are you doing? I'm going in my house, weirdo. You got one guy like that sneaking around town. Can you imagine? And I'm going to get back to it, but can you imagine pulling up to your crib? You don't know anybody's telling you. Can you imagine pulling up to your house and you get out the car and you're like, let me get my mail, let me get my purse, or let me get my jacket, man, gotta get inside, gotta cook dinner real quick. Let me see if, somebody dropped my package off. And like, you look up and there's this dude like standing at the edge of your driveway. And you look over, and you're like, man, I'm not really a scary person, but like, why are you standing there right now? Like, cause when I got out the car, there was nobody here. So where did you come from? That's the kind of people that the Ramseys were okay sending into the atmosphere when people were minding their business, just trying to get out of the car. That's the kind of stuff that the Ramseys were doing. This is the kind of thinking that makes sense to them. And if it makes sense to the Ramseys, it's going to make sense to the Steins. So if John is willing and able to very crudely walk on the boat with a shot weapon instead of a regular 9 or a little pea shooter, this dude is coming with some crazy firepower. Not just the lawyers, but I'm coming with some crazy firepower outside of that. What are you going to do with that on the boat? Let me get back to it. So, Susan had a lot of influence on the Ramseys' life. Their relationship with the Ramseys deepened only after JonBenet's death. While they had been neighbors and acquaintances, there's evidence suggesting that they were not particularly close prior to the murder. The intensity of their support and involvement post-tragedy stands in stark contrast to the seemingly casual connection they had before. We talked about particularly, I'm surprised that, number one, and it still gets me, if both of y'all were at Fleet and Priscilla White's house that night at the same time, and the party wasn't a party to where you have so many people in here that y'all are not talking to each other, like you're just stuffed in here with 45 people who are just like, oh, yo, I don't really know them. It's a house party. I don't really know them. Like, no, these are people that you know. Like, so y'all are going in and as John kind of describes it in one of the interviews, you know, the kids are in there by themselves, and, you know, JonBenet could have eaten anything. She could have eaten grapes or a fruit cocktail, blah, 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 blah. But the adults are in there doing adult things. If y'all get up to leave with your kids, y'all get up and leave early, people would see you. And if people see it, if the Steins were that important to you, people would see you as the Steins getting up. And I would think that Patsy would be like, oh girl, let me walk you out. Let me walk you out. I got something for you. You know, me and John bought something for you and the kids and the family. Let me walk you out and get that for you. But they didn't. They let the Steins leave and then stopped by their house to deliver something. And I guess came in there for 10, 15 minutes to talk and then deliver it on the way home. But then my second question was, why did the Steins have to leave early, even though they weren't going home to go to sleep? Why would y'all leave a party early if you're not going home to go to sleep? You leaving would insinuate that you got other things to do. But then the Ramseys, they're like, man, let me go by and check on the Steins and see what they're doing. That's always been kind of strange to me. So y'all, and then the day of, y'all really don't have any contact, and y'all don't call them first. They're right there. I mean, almost across the street, basically. Why didn't you call them? Tell them, yo, we really need you. They're the closest. If you need help, I don't even care if Fleet and Priscilla are the closest to you. If they're so close to you that it's like, I would call them first, because apparently they're close enough friends for you guys to drop a present off to them. They're close enough. So why didn't you just call them and then call Fleet? Because if you were really needing help, then just call them first. We know that Patsy had a propensity for calling people for help. So this only came about and grew more serious afterwards. And as a final note, while some outside sources have speculated that, and I thought I saw somewhere that they worked for the Pew Charitable Trust, I was trying to find that somewhere in the information. So let's switch over. These are the remaining concerns that I have. So let's switch over a little bit and try to discuss them. So we're jumping into the relationship, an overview of the relationship with Doug and Burke. So Doug Stine was known as a playmate and friend of Burke Ramsey. Patsy Ramsey identified Doug Stine as one of a group of 7 boys in Burke's class, and specifically mentioned him along with Luke Fernie, Anthony Pacquiao, as one of Burke's playmates. And she also mentioned here, I believe it was Anthony doesn't go to Mesa, but also mentioning, I think, if I'm correct, let me see. Okay, yeah, it's in this document. The Colby boys. If I remember the Colby boys correctly, the Colby boys were from down the street. And the Death of Innocence mentions the Colby boys specifically by saying that JonBenet really didn't play in the basement. I think that's what the Death of Innocence was saying. And I think Patsy is repeating it here. JonBenet didn't really play in the basement as much as Burke does. And the Colby boys would come over sometimes from down the street and play. And so Doug is mentioned as one of the playmates. John Ramsey also refers to Doug as Burke's buddy. I wonder if, as he talks about, JonBenet would come up to him, and I think he mentions this in The Other Side of Suffering, JonBenet would come up to him and be like, "Daddy, blah, blah, blah. You see me about to do my pageant." And John would say, "It's all about your talent, babe." And then she would run off and go play with Burke and his friends. And I wonder if that included Doug. I think it's very probable. John Ramsey referred to Doug as Burke's buddy. Their friendship seems to have been close enough that a brief visit to the Stines' home was made on one occasion, primarily because Doug was Burke's friend. Furthermore, there's a record in indicating that Burke and Doug were working together on projects around February 10th, suggesting that they engaged in activities together beyond just playing. So they went to the same school. And Judith Phillips mentioned this. They went to the same school, and they were working on science projects together at the time when JonBenet, after her she was murdered, Susan Stine was playing the role of chauffeur for Burke and Doug, and they would lay down in the car on the way to school and stuff like that. And they had all these kind of tricks. They would, and then Patsy finally decided to come over. They would work on school projects together, very much intertwined in each other's lives, very much playing together. I think there's a picture somewhere on the internet of Doug and Burke a little bit older, sitting together. I don't remember it. So this is a picture that I'm meaning. I think, well, obviously that's Burke. But I think this is Doug. Could be wrong. Faces change, body types change so much, and he's not looking directly at the camera. This could be somebody else. I could be completely wrong, but this is the picture that I'm talking about. So anyways, they had a close relationship. And so the significance of Doug Stine in the context of the investigation is further highlighted by the fact that the detective, and they mentioned this in the book very weirdly, I don't know what this proves for them, but the detective came by and took a swab sample from Doug Stine's mouth. And they took a swab from Doug Stine's mouth. And this is what they say. Apparently the cops were under some sort of Ramseys did it kind of deal. And Patsy is saying this contradicted their theory. Our deep concern when we saw what happened when the police showed up to the Stein's house. Once the detective had taken a swab sample from Doug Stine's mouth, the officer discovered that he had forgotten to bring any sort of container for carrying the sample back with him to the police department. Somewhat befuddled, he pushed the original wrapper he had torn off the swab back on it and left, carrying the swab in his hand. So Patsy Patsy and Susan were basically kind of saying, and they go on to say, "Oh, is this how you guys are treating all of the samples and contaminating the evidence?" I know y'all not talking about nobody contaminating any evidence. I know you not talking. All the stuff that y'all did on day one to contaminate. I mean, y'all didn't contaminate everything. What's Boulder Police Department. (1805 33rd Street in Boulder, Colorado). Directions: 740, and I could be wrong, 749th, Boulder, Colorado. I don't know when this was, what year this was. They could have already been out of Colorado. But if they were still in Colorado, I want you to know that the police department was 8 minutes from their house. If this was such a problem and you were so concerned and worried about the investigation, what you could have done was you could have said, "Oh, Mr. Officer, do we need to bring Doug up to the station so that we can get a good sample?" Because you know what? When I looked into forensic reports, I didn't see Doug tested. And this is probably why. Are you so lazy that instead, and so critical of the mistakes that the police are making, that you want to get to the bottom of this and make sure your son is cleared? Instead of being so worried about the mistakes that they are making, what you could have done was, oh, Mr. Officer, would you like us to come down there with you? It's only a 10-minute drive. Go down to the Boulder Police Department with him and say, okay, we'll just come down there with you. Oh, but I forgot. Y'all are averse. Y'all don't like going down there. Y'all don't like going to the police department. Anyways, so the next question deals with the December 23rd party with the 31 guests. So on December 31st, the Ramsey family hosted a Christmas party at their home, which was attended by like 31 people. According to Patsy, the attendees included the Whites, the Barnhills, the Fernies, the Steins, and the Barbers, along with all of their children and assorted house guests. John Ramsey also recalled this event as a Christmas party primarily for their family, friends, and children, mentioning that it usually took place a day or two before Christmas. The Steins, specifically Glen and Susan and their son Doug, were among the people present. The party involved several festive activities typical of children's Christmas celebration. Patsy Ramsey described that Santa Claus and Miss Claus made an appearance and distributed gifts to everyone. I think Patsy had like her own little planning of that. She mentioned that there was a little poem kind of thing associated with the gift giving, which she herself created and read from a black book. Furthermore, the children engaged in decorating gingerbread houses. Dinner was served, and the overall atmosphere was one of a standard Christmas party that the Ramsey family had hosted in previous years. And I think that Patsy was a little bit more involved with the whole Santa Claus thing and telling them, okay, this is what you say to this kid. This is what you should say to this kid. Like very much planning everything. And so interestingly, this December 23rd party is also mentioned in connection with a peculiar incident. According to an excerpt, there was an occasion during the party where Fleet White used the Ramsey's phone to make calls regarding medicine for his mother in Aspen, Colorado. That's where it was. I was trying to figure out where it was. In Aspen, Colorado. He accidentally dialed 911. The police called back, but Susan Stine reportedly prevented them from entering the house. Additionally, John Ramsey recalled that a man named Glen Meyer, who rented a room from the Barnhills, showed up at the party looking for them and was invited in by Patsy. This detail adds a layer of unexpected happenings to the description. So this Glen Meyer guy, there was also some random divinity student that was staying in the Steins' house when the Ramseys went over there. And so you had this full house. I mean, you had the Steins, you had the Ramseys, and then you had some sort of divinity student. So you had, a good amount of people up in this one house. John and Patsy staying in their own room. And then Burke, I guess, was kind of sleeping with Doug. And then you have this divinity student that they mentioned. And then here they randomly mentioned this guy named Glen Meyer. Why you would mention this guy, I don't know. They don't say anything about him acting suspicious. They just mention his name. I believe they did that to kind of throw a little bit of shade on this man, because you know how John be doing, man. You know how John and Patsy be doing, man. They just kind of throw people's names out there. And it's like, yo, you really got to stop. You know what I mean? Because everybody you mention, you legitimately want the cops to look at. What do we know about Glen Meyer that we need to know his name? You know what I mean? Like, why, and another guest, you could have it'd been perfectly fine if you said another guest showed up. So, sorted house guests, I think this was, yeah. Anyways, man. Oh, it's pulling from. Okay, so it's pulling from my notes. Whatever, that's fine. Anyways, the next question being, The 911 call accidentally made by Fleet White and Susan Stine intercepts, going a little bit deeper into that. So during the Christmas party, Fleet White makes the call using the telephone to make a series of calls. His intention was to arrange some medicine to be sent to his mother. This is what they're saying. And this is according to what source? Oh, it's still from my notes. Still from my notes. So anyways, because I want to see, because they had a whole thing on it. Okay. But anyways, because I thought there was more on it. But anyways, he's calling for some stuff for his mom in Aspen. He's calling all these people. In the process of making these calls, he misdialed and contacted 911. Shortly after the 911 accident was made, police respond to the residence. Susan Stine, who becomes a close friend, intervenes. Now, according to Patsy Ramsey's account, Susan Stine checked with Fleet White and other people present in the house to ascertain the situation. And in doing so, Susan Stine informed the responding police officers that a mistake had been made. Okay, I know a little bit about Roxy. Okay. The point that I want to make here is that it's almost as if Susan is nosy. It's almost what it seems like. Almost seems like Susan is nosy. Because it's like, why can't you just say, Fleet, did you call the cops? What are y'all doing up in this house that you don't want to let the cops come in and say hello? You answering the door and you don't even know why the cops are here. You could have easily turned around, would have been just as easy to turn around and be like, hey, anybody call the cops around here? Anybody need the cops? Anybody need it, please? Susan's response, Susan being scary, her response was to not let the cops come in. Oh no, I can't let you come in. You got to stay out there. I can't let you. Why? What are you doing? What you got going on in there? What are y'all doing up in this house? It's a regular Christmas party with 31 people, right? What are y'all doing in this house? Because even on Home Alone, they let the cop in the house, but the cop turned out to be a criminal. And I know it's a movie, but I'm just saying. Doesn't apply. I get it. I'm just joking. But why wouldn't you let, what's the blocking for? I don't understand that. What's the blocking for? Why won't you let the cops in the house? Number one. Number two, why don't you just let Fleet speak for himself? If the man was truly just ordering some medicine for his mom, I mean, that's easy enough. Just let the cops come in. And be like, oh, I think my friend called. If you want to come in and talk to him, get a statement, whatever you need to do, blah, blah. If it's a festive activity, if it's Christmas, y'all not doing nothing anyway. So is what you're telling me. Y'all not doing nothing anyway. It's just a festive activity. We ain't doing nothing up in here. We just eating, being jolly, and being merry. That's it. Why do you need to stop the cops from coming in to see what y'all are doing? Because like if you got something that you just like, I'm not doing anything wrong, but I'm doing something wrong. Like, you can come, we can talk to you, but if I open this door, like, if you come in, you might see something that you're not supposed to see. You know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of what it's given a little bit. You might see something that you're not supposed to see. We might at the time be indulging a little bit in a little something. We might be indulging in that. I don't know what y'all are doing. I mean, because you're so protective over this man calling, you could have just called him to the door and been like, Fleet, explain yourself so this man could write a report and leave. That's it. Notably, Susan Stine reportedly prevented the police from entering the house. Exact details of the interaction with the police are not fully elaborated on, but her actions suggest that she took responsibility for clarifying the situation. She didn't even know what was going on. She took responsibility for clarifying the situation and assuring the authorities that there was no actual emergency requiring them to be there. This intervention by Stein highlights the close relationship between the Ramsey family at the party. So, and y'all are not even friends like that yet. Or so you tell me, because y'all weren't called first. Yet you take, what's the word that I'm looking for? What is the word that I'm looking for? You don't even know what's going on, but you take preemptive measures to stop and be like, nah, you can't come in here just in case we got something going on in here. That's what it feels like. You're not even cool with Patsy and John like that. They don't even think of you first. They think of Fleet White and Priscilla first. But you didn't bust it up in here and did all that and took over answering the door. How did you even hear the door? Did the cops knock? And at 31 people, you were the closest to the door? And you had to answer the door? That screams to me that it's possible that what she did was she heard the door. Somebody knocked on the door and she heard it. And somebody said, hey, the cops are outside. And she said, wait. Let me answer it. Why? What would give her the idea that she was important enough to stop who was ever at the door? And I'm just speculating here, to stop who was ever at the door and say, wait up, let me answer it. You going about your business. That's what I don't understand. Why do you have to, and who gave you authority to answer the door? I understand that in your job, you know, you did some planning and stuff like that. So you're used to kind of planning events and stuff like, and being on top of it. I get that. But have you ever met that person who is in everything? Like in every conversation, right? You might be off on a side conversation with your homie and you talking to your homie and you're like, hey, yo, man, last night you will not believe I had this crazy itch that I just could not shake. And you're talking over here to your friend and Susan Stine, like, it's not a problem, but she just butts in the conversation. It's not a problem. I mean, I'm not talking about anything crazy. It's just like, I wasn't talking to you. Oh, what were you talking about? You're saying that you had an itch? Yeah, man, I had an itch. And it's like, okay, I mean, I'll allow it because it's just like, maybe she's just trying to make friends. But all right, cool. And I look at my homie and I'm like, anyways, blah, blah, blah. And we just kind of talking later in the conversation. I moved to the kitchen, minding my business again, looking in the fridge for something to drink. Or I see a Coke. Susan comes over. I pull the Coke out. Susan comes over. Oh, no. You can't have the Cokes. How did you get over here to be watching me and what I'm doing in the fridge? No. You can't have the Cokes. Could you please drink some water? Okay, no problem. So I go and get some water. And then from there, it seems like everything I do, I go to sit on the couch. Oh, yeah. I'm sitting down anyway. I'm on my way down. Yeah, you can sit right here. You can sit right here. That's fine. May I help you? Why are you bothering me? Get away. That's the kind of vibe that Susan, like that person that seems helpful at first, but then the more they help, the more you're like, yo, this is actually kind of annoying, for you to be over here bothering me. It's really kind of annoying for you to be over here because now it seemed like you were helping, but now it just seems like kind of bothering me, a little bit. That's the kind of vibe I'm starting to get from Susan. Someone that's overly in your business, but overly paranoid, high strung, wanting to be seen as more important. And I'm not saying you're not important. I'm just saying somebody that wants to present themselves as more important, or that kind of long time, deeply connected friend. It's like you ever met somebody to where like y'all are chilling again, but this individual is like more into you than you are to them, and than you are into them in this friendship. And you might go to talk to somebody and like, I mean, I just met you like 3 weeks ago. You know what I mean? And you're already trying to order for me. Oh no, she likes ranch on the side. Get her ranch on the side. And you're like, that's okay, but I can kind of answer for myself. You know what I mean? I don't have any problem, but I can answer for myself. So I just don't understand why you did that. That's the kind of vibe that I'm getting from Susan. So the accidental 911 call made by Fleet and Susan Stine's subsequent interception of the police response remain a point of interest and has been described as somewhat of a mystery. This incident occurred just days before the tragic death, and people say that, of JonBenet, adding a layer of unusual events to the crime, because people are like, and this is what makes people believe that JonBenet died before the 26th, something like this. Why were the cops called? Were the cops called because something happened and nobody talked about it? That kind of deal. That's what, makes people kind of ask these questions. Looking at John and Patsy's stop at the Steins' house on Christmas night. So on Christmas night, after leaving the White's house, where they had Christmas dinner with family and friends, John and Patsy proceed to make brief stops to deliver gift baskets. One of the planned stops was at the residence of the Stine family, neighbors, and friends whose son Doug is known as a playmate to Burke. According to John Ramsey, this occurred around 8:30 p.m. to 8:45. So probably about 8:30, 8:45. And Patsy also confirms this stop, stating that they're visiting after visiting the Walkers. I think it was Roxy. They went to the Steins. The intention was to deliver a gift basket to the Stine family. Upon arriving at the Steins' house, located a short 2 or 3 minutes from the Walkers, Patsy Ramsey certainly went into their home. John, where's that coming from? Okay, this is the interview. 98 interview is where that's coming from. So went into the home. However, John noted that it wouldn't have been unusual for Burke to go in because his buddy was Doug. So this suggests that while not definitively remembered, it's plausible that Burke, awake at this point, may have briefly went in to visit with Doug as well. So duration of the stop at the Steins' house is a notable point regarding the timeline. While John Ramsey does not specify the length of the visit in his interviews, the analysis provided infers a potential duration of 10 to 15 minutes based on a reported recollection by Susan Stine. And that was the video by Susan Stine where she said, 10 to 15 minutes, they came in. And so what I start to estimate then is if you leave the Whites around 8:30 and you stop at the Walkers for a few minutes, then you probably arrive at the Steins around about 8:42. You visit with them for 10 to 15 minutes. You get home approximately about you leave about 8:52, 8:58, just depending, because that's 10 to 15 minutes. And so that puts you at home. The implications of the stop on the evening's timeline, 10 to 15 minute visit. John said we got home at about 9:15. So just trying to analyze and make sure that that falls within the scope. And you're not too far. Maybe like 1 or 2 minutes, I think, from your house. So you could get home by 9 o'clock, maybe. Timeline is crucial because it sets the stage for events that occurred once the Ramseys returned home. The time of arrival does influence the subsequent sequence of activities, including when JonBenet was carried out and put to bed, and the rest of the family went on about their business. So any ambiguity or discrepancies in the recollection of the duration of the stops could definitely affect the reconstruction of the timeline, because I have to believe that if you stopped at the Steins house and talked for 10 to 15 minutes and everybody had kids possibly, then you probably, your kids are probably good friends with their kids. And so, you probably went there, time can fly so fast. And I mean that time could fly so fast. Before you know it, you could be somewhere 10, 15 minutes and not even know it. And so I'm wondering if, in conclusion, the Ramseys stopped at Stine house on Christmas night with Burke, while seemingly brief, is a relevant point to say that it's possible that you stopped about 10 to 15 minutes at each home, but you're just not saying that. So if that's possible, then you left at 8:30, went to the Walkers because you had 3 people. Say you stay at the Walkers for 10 minutes at 8:40, talk for 5. Well, you get there. We leave at 8:30. Takes you like 3 or 4 minutes. You get out, walk up, talk a little bit, or knock on the door, wait for them to come to the door, and they open the door at about 8:35, 8:45. You're leaving. You say, hey, here's this gift. How's everything? Merry Christmas, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, girl, we're going to Charlevoix tomorrow. We're flying out, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, we have the Christmas and blah, blah. Maybe you step inside for a second. That's 15 minutes. That's 8:45. Then you go to the next person and you kind of do the same thing. It's going to take you about 2 or 3 minutes to get there, get knocked on the door. It's 5 minutes. Get there, get knocked on, go to the back of the car, get the presents, get the gift basket out of the trunk or whatever, and then go up there 5 minutes, and so we're 8:45, 8:55. We're already at 9 o'clock after 2 people. Then you go to the Steins, and then from 9 to 9:15, you're at the Steins. And then you probably pull up at the house at about 9:20, and then you still got to get everybody out of the car and get them situated. And so I guess my point in saying this is that according to what Susan Stine is saying, and according to the probability of you staying over at people's houses, just to talk a little bit, time getting away from you, because I know you didn't go up and then just turn around and just be like, all right, here's your basket, I'm gone. You probably legitimately, if you left at 8:30, you probably legitimately got home at about 9:25. So there's no way that y'all got in bed by 9:30. If anything, you came in and went straight to take JonBenet upstairs. Burke is downstairs putting together, as you say, and John has said this on multiple occasions. I don't think I have to re-explain that. Plenty of times you said that Burke wanted to stay downstairs and play with his toy. If you get home at 9:20 and you get inside by 9:25, you put JonBenet in bed and you start changing her and stuff like that. Read her a bedtime story. That's about 9:30 if you're moving fast. That's more like 9:35, 9:40. But then you got to go downstairs with Burke. Patsy is handling you got to go downstairs with Burke. You stay with Burke probably about 15, 20 minutes. We are at 9:35, 9:45, 50. 50, 55, 9:50 or 55, depending on the 15, 20-minute span. I'll say 20 minutes because you got to put this thing together. Probably more like 30. So this is what I'd say. It's possible that Burke's downstairs playing with the toy and maybe he's like, yo, I'm hungry. Can I get something to eat? And it's possible that John helped him make his snack. It's possible that John helped him make his snack. They played a little bit. Burke said he's hungry. All right, champ, let me get you something to eat. And then we got to go to bed. Cool. But at this time, Burke sits there eating for about 10, 15 minutes. It's 9:50, 9:55, 10, 10:05, 10:10 maybe. Burke is eating his food. And guess what? Now it's time for you to go to bed. He goes upstairs. John and Patsy are just spent. I've been up since 6:30. I'm spent. I'm done. I'm tired. I'm going upstairs. I'm going to take a melatonin. I'm going to bed. But you know what? Like Burke told us, I'm not done. I'm going back downstairs. And so maybe it takes you 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes to go to sleep. Let's say 15 minutes. 10:10, 10:25. That puts you in bed at about 10:30. Okay? That puts you in bed at about 10:30. You're knocked out. Burke checks at the bottom of the step, comes down. I say Burke is probably downstairs trying to put that thing back down because apparently you didn't finish. Burke is probably down there about 10:45. And this intruder has been waiting around this entire time, listening and hearing things going on. Burke is downstairs and bruh. Nope. Burke is downstairs for 45 minutes, I estimate, because he said he went back downstairs on the Dr. Phil show. If it's 10:30, it's now you're down there for 45 minutes. You're down there till about, say, 10:30, 11. Starting at 10:30, I'm sorry. 11, 11:15. We're quiet. Burke is down there for at least 45 minutes trying to put this thing together. The killer probably doesn't know this. The intruder probably wouldn't know this. So that intruder would have run into Burke because the intruder needed time, because John was saying that the ransom note was, people were saying, oh, I was reading some form and people were like, oh, that ransom note was written ahead of time, and all of that stuff was made ahead of time. Yeah. But to take action against JonBenet, this individual, wherever he was sitting, would have had to come by Burke on the way down, because if rigor mortis was setting in at 1:05 and we date back 12 hours to 1 a.m., then you only have a window between 11:15 p.m. and she probably died at 12:30 in the morning. So you only have a window between 11:15 and 12, like an hour, and would say 11:15 and 12:30. So like an hour and 15 minutes, you only have that window. And that's what this timeline of Susan Stine kind of gets me. If she says 10 to 15 minutes and we sort of estimate that killer would have had to walk right past Burke. And I mean it. And there is no reason. There is none. There is no reason that this killer would have walked past Burke to get to JonBenet and walk right back downstairs? Because if Burke was sitting down there eating pineapple, Burke would have to be there for JonBenet. Somebody that JonBenet trusts would have to be there. Whatever she ate, they would have to be there to give her something. Now this goes out of the window if JonBenet ate a fruit cocktail earlier at the party. However, what I don't think is that that fruit cocktail would have stayed in JonBenet's system that long, is what I'm saying. JonBenet would have, because it's fruit. I think one website I was looking at said pineapple will move through your system in about 30, 40 minutes. Pineapple will move through your system about 30, 40 minutes. So if you have like a fruit cocktail, that's probably gone already. I feel like the snow crab was gone already. Yeah, I feel like the snow crab was gone already. But anyways, the individual would have had to walk right past Burke, and JonBenet would not have eaten anything from anyone that she didn't trust. So it's like, man, it's almost like Burke is putting himself in the middle of the crime scene. And not only that, but down there to see the individual moving around. He's got to be there. Anyways, just kind of thinking out loud. Next question. Early signs of closeness in the timeline, of altering narratives. Early signs of closeness began with Doug Stine and Burke Ramsey. Patsy Ramsey explicitly identified Doug Stine as one of the group of 7 boys. Further emphasizing this bond, John Ramsey said, this is Burke's buddy, and they went to school together and stuff like that. Beyond play dates, of course, they did everything together. The Ramsey family activities on Christmas night provide key points of considering the timeline. I got to go in. I got to go talk to my boy and see what's up when we go by the house. Brief visit to the Steins. Continue to establish a relationship. So I already know Doug. And I guess this point makes me kind of question just how close Burke and Doug were. They go to the same school and they essentially hang out all the time. They after the death of JonBenet, they traveled together a lot, and I mean driving. He's up in Charlevoix. Like I said, Susan Stine is up in Charlevoix, and this is what Patsy's saying. They're up in Charlevoix together. So it's possible that that night, Doug was over there. I'm not saying he is. I'm not saying I believe he is personally, but I'm also saying it's possible that Doug was over there that night is all I'm saying. Because we didn't get the swab, but he's over there. Looking at some points again to notice, and I think this is the final thing. Another point is Susan Stine, like I said, being a gatekeeper, establishing herself as this gatekeeper. They called her Patsy's pit bull, but establishing herself as a gatekeeper. If it's a mistake, why are you blocking? And the behavioral, and the last thing I'll say is the behavioral pattern with how you deal with the police is consistent. Something had nothing to do with you. When they came in looking for Fleet, or they came in looking for whoever called, you hid behind the door. Similar to when you were kind of really impersonating an officer, and they came for you, and they came to your house, you wouldn't open the door for them. And I was like, yo, that's crazy. That's crazy that, because I don't know. I guess I feel like if the cops come, you got to open the door. You can't not open the door. And maybe Susan knew her rights, to the point to where she said, I have a right to keep this door closed. Or she was just being scary and she was assuming that she could keep the door closed, whether she knew it or not. She just kept the door closed because that's what she felt most comfortable with. I'm wondering. I think it's the latter. I'm gonna be honest with you. You're doing that because that's how you feel most comfortable. Regardless of what you should be doing, what you need to be doing. Bro, you ask for a weapon, you putting your foot down, you talking big stuff, you jumping in everybody's business. Rah, rah, rah. Somebody would describe you as a pit bull. But all of a sudden, when the cops come around, you don't have the same energy. That's weird to me. Like, all of a sudden, you've piped down. That's a little weird to me. Because y'all got all these jokes, and the way that she did it, though, y'all got all these jokes for when the cops actually show up and be like, what's up? You're like, oh, no, you can't come in here. Matter of fact, and then when they ask you afterwards, what was up then? Oh, it was just a joke. It was meaningless. That's a felony. That's not a joke. That is a felony. Impersonating an officer. That is a felony. Not only that, but what you said when you were talking to Charles Brennan. Hey, yo, great articles. You were trying to impersonate an officer and say, hey, because the articles were about the intruder theory. You were trying to say if Brennan wouldn't have been smart enough to be like, something ain't right. And he would have been like, I got a random email from the chief of police today who congratulated me saying that he believes the intruder theory. So is this like a signal that the tides are turning and the police are now starting to believe the intruder theory? And he reports that, and it's not even true. It was all based on a lie, a fake email of someone who pretended to be an officer to possibly sway public opinion. And so if he goes and reports that and it gets out, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, if the police believe it, then there must be an intruder. And so in a very manipulative and cunning way, that helps to sort of push the intruder theory. This is the type of stuff that Susan Stine is doing. Going out on a limb for Patsy, impersonating an officer and thinking that she's above the law and won't get caught, won't have any actions taken against her, which tells me that she believes that she has the ability to talk her way out of anything. If you come up to me, I'm just going to bat my eyelashes and get you up out of here. That is concerning because that's a little bit of a level of manipulative because you know what you're doing. You know what you're trying to do. You know what your intent is. And you are saying whatever trouble I get into, it's not going to be real trouble because I'm just going to say this and that. I'm not going to let him in. I'm going to play dumb. I'm going to play like I don't know anything. When he asks to get in the door, I'm going to play like I don't know anything. Them folks could have came in there and arrested you and taken you to jail. That is a felony. But you didn't take that serious because you felt like you were above the law. This paints a picture of not only why somebody like a Susan Stine and a Glen Stine in a very, like I said, we still have more to go in a very like overview fashion. We might be dealing with somebody who is manipulative, playing games. When y'all talk about this, when the Ramseys talk about discussing strategy, y'all are on the same page. Not only that, but like what's weird to me, and this is my final point. I think the Steins were mentioned at least 70 something odd times at least by their last name in the death of innocence. They were mentioned like 70 something odd times. In John's book, The Other Side of Suffering, to my count, the Steins were not mentioned once. None of them. Not Doug, not Glen, not Susan. The name Stein wasn't even in that book anywhere. What? Bro, they were so pivotal to how y'all handled. Pivotal for sure. Because you were at Pasta J's and Patsy was like, Patsy can try to sugarcoat it all she wants to. But Patsy was scared of Pasta J, I believe. Because when Pasta J went off on those students or those engineers, Patsy was like, hey, yo, I got to get up out of here. And she went over to Susan Stine's house. Wasn't even supposed to stay, but she was like, yo, move over. We moving in. I'm not going back to that dude's house. I'm going to call my husband and tell him, come on. That's John's business partner. And John didn't say, okay, babe, give Jay the benefit of the doubt. We're going back over Jay's. Give him the benefit of the doubt. He was just standing up for us. John didn't say that. John was like, hey, yo, I'm going with my wife. We will all stay over the Steins. How that conversation went with Jay, I don't know. To let him know, oh, by the way, when you get home, we're not going to be there. I don't know how that conversation went, but Patsy made a split decision that she was scared of Jay, I believe. And she was like, hey, yo, I got to go. Went over there and just kind of bombarded their way in and began talking strategy on how we're going to handle things. Y'all were so close. Y'all were so close that you could go over there through thick and thin. We have built a bond together that we have protected you. We have nurtured you guys back to health. And all of a sudden, them boys ain't in John's most recent book in 2012. Not at all. They spent a lot of time together. Susan rode for the Ramseys. Covered them, did everything for them. And that's how it turns out. That's kind of weird to me. What happened to the friendship? Y'all were supposed to be bonded for life. I don't understand that. But anyways, let me know what you think. I'm not going to keep on going. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Let me know where you're at with it. What are your thoughts? Appreciate you watching from wherever you are. Till next time, take it easy. Continue to show some love. Practice love. Take care.